But to get us kicked off, the lovely Michelle. What I love about Michelle is this is actually the first time that we have met screen to screen, face to face. However, we have liked, shared, agreed, commented on so many of the similar things on different Facebook groups and so on and so forth. And so when she said, "Hey, I would love to talk to your audience," I jumped at the opportunity. So with that, I would like to introduce Michele Olivier.
No.
Hello, hello. So Michelle, let's get kicked off. I would love to hear just about you, who you are, your business. Why are you here today? Just give us the quick rundown.
The 5 second elevator pitch. I have over 20 years of HR and recruitment experience. I have recruited across sectors and sizes. I then transferred those skills into working specifically with companies to design their recruitment procedures. So I have literally written the systems, questions, etc., that you have to go through. I'm also a qualified career coach, so I work both sides of the desk. I help the job seekers navigate the systems that I write with companies, and that's who I am. And I am here to help because I am sick of women being marginalized in the workplace. So let's do it.
I love it. So do you work exclusively with women or is that more of a passion?
So my company is an all women is an all women company,
Love it.
and we absolutely have we will take anybody's money, but in terms of the places that we give our time and do more pro bono stuff, those are focused on marginalized groups. So I do work with the with you guys, and then I also work with the Austin Queer Job Board and help them and stuff like that. So
I love it. And are your clients typically just in the Austin area or are we nationwide?
we're global.
Ooh,
So
love it.
I lived and worked in the UK for 10 years. So you may hear occasionally in my accent that you're just like, oh, whoa, that was roguely British. And it seeps through every once in a while. But that means that I have a lot of professional connections and clients and that kind of stuff over there as well. And then that's kind of spreads out globally. So we're pretty blessed to have a big global base.
I love it. Something else we need to talk about. I was there for 2 years and I miss it dearly. I would go back in a heartbeat. Um, okay, so I have a couple sections of topics here.
Okay.
As I said before, please, anyone, feel free to jump in. But as you know, the vast majority of our talent pool are returners. So
Yep.
women who were caregiving and want to get back into the workforce. And we want like the real deal. Don't feel like you're going to hurt our feelings. Honestly, do recruiters, external or internal, care about this gap?
So I have a couple of answers to that.
Yeah, love it.
My short answer is, I mean, the douchebags do.
Yeah.
But and that unfortunately there's a lot of douchebags. But my longer answer to that is that the concern isn't about a gap. The concern is about skill slippage. And so the work that they do with prowess is, for me as a recruiter, that would straight away be like, okay, we've topped up our skills. That's We're ready now. And so it shows workplace readiness. It shows commitment to something other than a care responsibility in the household. So that is what you are, that is the concern, and that's what you're looking for. In general, what I warn clients about is that if you have been out for more than 3 years, it is unlikely that you would return at the same level as what you went out as. And that's simply because time marches on and skills move on and everything else. And so at the kind of 3 year cutoff, people worry that things have moved on enough. that you may not be current. That's particularly exacerbated in the digital and IT fields, but it is kind of across the board in that regard.
That makes perfect sense. Um, so I totally get the 3-year thing. How do you ensure though that you're not being underemployed?
I mean, I think right now a lot of people are being underemployed. So I think step one is just get zen with the fact that you may be. Um, when I work with a client who's a returner, what I tend to say is assume that you're probably going to be underemployed going in, but then once you have been there and been back in for 12 months, the gap goes away and you
Oh,
get back all of that experience. And then for your next job, you can bump. So I work with clients to say, okay, so maybe today to have our re-entry point, we're going to come in here. Great. After I've been back in and had my hands dirty for 12 months, now I can start looking for whatever is next. It's back up at a more commensurate level with my experience. And a savvy employer knows that and brings you in with an understanding that there's a pretty meteoric growth opportunity for you.
hmm.
Not savvy employers get to miss out on your skills when you go somewhere else in 18 months. Sad panda for them.
Love this. I've never heard the 12 months thing. Is that some like a rule of thumb, or is that what you're seeing when you're working with people?
Both. I mean, it's kind of a rule of thumb, but I would say that right now, and for a few years now, the ROI point for most employers on placement is 18 months.
Oh,
So I think that, and for people who aren't in the industry and don't speak talent acquisition, what that means is that in order for them to break even on the cost or come out ahead on the cost of hiring you, training you, onboarding you, et cetera, they need for you to stay in that position for 18 months. So if they get that, they're good. And so it's around 18 months that other recruiters and companies and that sort of thing start looking at people pretty seriously, which is why I say about 12
mm,
months. And then it's time to start thinking about and getting ready for that move. One of the things that that I warn people about is that if you possibly can, don't get ready, don't you need to start getting ready for your next move 6 months before you're actually ready to look for the job,
hmm. And
especially
why
once
is
you're at a
that?
professional level, because there's things that you do that lay that groundwork. So especially these days where so much is driven by LinkedIn, to get those algorithms to know who you are and what you are
Mm,
just takes time. It's like your personal SEO optimization, and it just takes time to get there. And so if you are working and posting and, networking correctly in LinkedIn for 6 months, you're going to find that then when you do actually start to apply, you're looking at 3 weeks and you're in a job. Whereas otherwise, you're going to
yeah,
have closer to 6 to 8 weeks because you've got to make up a gap there from a presence and a personal branding perspective.
I love that. So, that makes perfect sense for returners, that 3 years. Another big group that we have in our community are women who did something for, let's say, the first 5, 10 years, and then just want to pivot into something completely different. How would you handle that, um, breaking into a new career space?
So that again, you have to be able to demonstrate a professional interest in that space. So you have to kind of create a professional narrative around that. What I always say is that, anytime when you're creating a resume, you want to show a cohesive arc to what it is that you're applying
Mm,
for. So if you have always been an IT project manager and now you think that sucks and you want to go be a nonprofit program manager, great. Create a cohesive arc where you took on pieces of program management that's applicable and then create just literally a
Raise your hand.
some
From
kind
participants.
some kind of something that explains why you want to make that shift. and then use your social media tools like LinkedIn, et cetera, to position yourself and explain that shift to that area. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Let's put a pin in that because I really like the idea of the arc. Linda, I see there's a question.
Yeah. So Jennifer is asking about the difference between W-2 and contract roles. So she's saying she's seeing a shift that's been happening for about 4 years now. And she's wondering if employers are valuing contractor experience more now.
I would say that employers value experience. I don't find that they value contractor experience any less, and never have. They love the experience of contractors. The only thing that I have ever known them to be worried about is serial contractors if they are actually interested in a full-time role. So again, you have to create a narrative about why you're wanting to leave contracting and go into a full-time permanent position, but you should never be afraid to take a contract role. Money is money is money. It all spins the same, girl.
I love it. So Jennifer, actually, that was a really good segue to what I was thinking. So, or a question I was thinking. Mm-hmm. So with Prowess, we place a lot of women in contract roles because it fits better in their lifestyle. So you said that the ROI of placements for full-time roles are typically 18 months. Mm-hmm. What should we target the ramp up time to be for a consulting role that maybe isn't 40 hours a week?
What do you mean by a ramp up time?
So, or what do you think that point, like the 18 months, is where the employers get their ROI for the search to find that?
It depends on the specific role. Usually it's around 3 months. And a big part of that, honestly, is actually female driven, because a big part of that is a lot of contract roles come out of maternity leave. And so 12 weeks is a pretty standard length of time that they need a contract for. It's because it's a couple of things, right? So it's a maximum mat leave in this country, which don't even get me started on how that's a terrible idea. But it's also, it's a quarter. So you can say, okay, we have extra budget bandwidth. So for Q3, we're going to bring in somebody to help out in this area. Great. And so for all kinds of different reasons, 12 weeks is about right. And then I would also say, like, don't be afraid with contracts that because it says 12 weeks, that means at the end of 12 weeks, you don't have a job. My experience is that probably 60 to 75% of contracts get extended well beyond that. And that's not counting the ones that just straight up are using this as try before you buy. So they initiate it as like a 12-week contract. They find somebody, like they use a trusted partner like Prowess to send somebody to fill a role. If they like your face, then they keep you. Right. So like a great example of that, I know, to use a really big name, recently Twitter actually did that. They were opening a DEI role, which can we all just say about time? And they, but they had no idea what that would look like. So they opened it as a contract role with the idea that the person would come in and help them figure out what the heck a DEI person at Twitter would do. I have a list if they need that. And they brought that person in as a contract with every intention that once they knew what the heck they were doing, if this person was still a good fit, that they would then become permanent. So that is a very normal business practice.
And so I love this. And I love that you said it's that 3-month ramp, because with Prowess, our minimum to work with us is they have to work with us for 3 months, because that's what we're seeing too. Yeah. However, what are some tips and tricks that you would give talent to ramp quicker? Because we're seeing that if our contractors ramp quicker, our employers want to keep them, which makes sense, right?
So I would say, before you start the contract, you need to have one of the most difficult things about returning to work, and I know that I'm probably telling everybody something they already know, is the fact that the devil is in the details, right? Yeah. So I always tell people that in terms of ramping, if you make sure that the details of your life are where they need to be before you start. So the week before you start, act like whatever your working hours are, you are not available for anything. You've turned off your phone, you're not picking up the kids, like you are working in that zone, then that's going to make that first week a lot easier for you to focus. And then I also recommend doing things like the prowess community. So identify these are the top 5 skills that I'm going to need in this role and spend that week during those times that are going to be your working times focusing on upskilling. Like you're going back into project management, great. There are 9,000 agile or whatever your methodology is, training programs online. Do them all so that when you hit the ground day one, you walk in sounding like exactly the professional that you've been billed as. And as soon as you build that buy-in and credibility from them, there's no more ramp up at that point. Like you're just there and they're like, oh, great. It's Jennifer. She knows all the things. Great, Jennifer. Here's all your work. Done.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I'm going to stop real quick. Any questions? Awesome. And good, because I have so many more. So resumes.
Mhm.
We both agreed and got into a long rant. We were on the same side about how resumes are bullshit. Tell
Yes.
me about that. Why do you think that? Yeah, tell me more.
I mean, a resume is essentially nothing more than professional name dropping. Like all it does is list like, oh, this is the company I work for. It tells you nothing. Like the fact that you worked for Google for 12 months, maybe you were shit. Can I say that? Sorry. Maybe you were terrible at your job. Like there are good employees and bad employees at every single company. I have had people try to argue with me. Yeah, well, if you've survived for 5 years at a big company, then clearly that means you're good. No, it doesn't. It means you gamed the system. Well done. And I'm also super irritated by the fact that, like, we know that we have a problem, a really severe problem in this country with institutionalized racism, institutionalized sexism, all the rest of it. And then we keep using the same damn tool that all it does is reflect people's experience working in those racist and sexist systems. And then we get surprised that we keep getting the same results. Like, oh, you mean as, a woman, I already have been overlooked in IT. And now when you look at my resume, it looks like I don't have a lot of IT experience. Shocking. Like, what makes infinitely more sense is to move to a system that actually looks at what are your skills, what are your talents, what are your abilities, and then go from there. And I tell every client I ever have that, and I work really hard. I feel a lot of times like I'm a voice in the darkness, and actually that's part of what I loved about you. I was like, okay, somebody inside, because it's just ridiculous. Literally, resumes and interview processes were created and institutionalized in this country in the early 20th century to reinforce class, race, and gender norms. Is literally how and why they got to be created as they were. And then we keep using them and keep being surprised that those things continue to be perpetuated.
I didn't know that. That is, wow. I mean, it's like I knew that, but I had never heard. Wow. Ugh, that makes me sick. So here we are, 2021. A lot of shit went down. Do you feel like the sexism and racism is getting better in the workplace or worse or staying the same?
I actually think in some ways it's getting worse because I think that there's so much virtue signaling. There's so many companies making noise about, oh, we really want to be DEI inclusive. We really want to do this, that, and the other. And it's really hard as an applicant, if you genuinely care about having those things in your environment, to know what is virtue signaling and what is a genuine investment in that change. And I have to say, on behalf of all of the candidates, I have a podcast that I do called Hey, I Want Your Job. And I talk to CEOs, HR execs, like all of the people, right, who should be driving this change. And almost every one of them I ask, how can you convince me that your company is not virtue signaling, that you are actually making change? And not one single one has yet to manage to do it. Every single one, like, and it's not because they're horrible people.
No.
It's because they just genuinely don't get it. They don't understand how far from the mark they are, and what that really looks like. And they're not willing to challenge the sort of fundamental assumptions that we have about work. Things like, hey, we need to stop using racist tools like resumes and interviews. And until you're willing to challenge that fundamental of a level of an assumption, then you're not actually going to bring about change. And so for me, like, I would rather a racist just show up and tell me they're a racist. Like you know what I mean? Like, I'm all about people like wearing their opinions like that on their shirt, because it makes it really easy for me. Conversation. I'm like, oh, you're not my people. Okay, y'all have fun, jog on, right? And I think that there are organizations that have been really clear through 1,000 behaviors over the years exactly where they feel, how they feel about women, how they feel about minorities, how they feel about all of that. And now, rather than owning that and just being in that space, now it's a little more insidious and hidden behind veils of, no, we totally have a DEI task force. We had found 3 brown people in this one division, and they're totally now a task force. Are we paying them more for extra work? No, but we're totally going to listen to their voice probably next year. That's our plan. Like, you know what I mean? So, anyway.
Yes.
I hope that answered your question. I feel like that was really long rant.
I loved it. No, I loved every second of it. Every second of it. So we talked about, I mean, we didn't name the companies who are doing it wrong, because I think there's umpteen million examples, and that's not what we're here to do. But I would love an example of a company who's doing something right. I know that there's probably no one who's getting it right 100%, but what is a good example? And even if you can't name the company, but what is something that you've seen, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're starting to move in the right direction.
So I think that there's a bunch of companies that, bless them, are trying. So Google really famously has their coder and hackathons, that rather than submitting applications and resumes and that kind of stuff to Google, you can log in to their hacking academies. And if you successfully do the tutorial, I am not a hacker, so I don't know the right words, but if you're good there, you can get a job at Google without going through those traditional. So that's good. It's a big step in the right direction. I mean, we're not there, but it's a step in the right direction. I would say that I know that IBM, I was on a call with them the other day. They're really trying. Okay. They are doing a lot of things to try to reach out to a more diverse community for applicants, to build up applicants in different fields at early levels, and then measuring successes and re-educating managers who have a low, higher rate for people from marginalized groups, all of which is great stuff if you're going to continue to try to work in that. So there are things that are happening. There are companies that are doing some good things. It's just, we have a lot further to go.
We really, really do. So one of the top things that Prowess hangs our hat on and think needs to be turned on its head as far as the job securing hiring process is we need to infuse more of the behavior style, the emotional intelligence, etc. I personally think that you can, I know you can teach emotional intelligence. I know you can teach empathy, but I think as a hiring manager, it's more important to have those skills, and then I can teach you the right technology than the other way around.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that.
Please do.
And say, that's a little bit of an ableist perspective, because for neuroatypicals, they struggle with neurotypical perceptions of empathy. And why do you need to be empathetic to be a great coder?
Great point.
So there are some roles where you don't need empathy, that it's about hard skills, it's about other things. And so what I tell my clients on the corporate end is look at what you actually need. Look at what you actually care about and measure that. Quit getting hung up on these things that so many managers, and it's not just you, Ashley, like as a set, like that's a good set, right? To get hung up
Right.
on.
No, but
But
that's a
so
great
many
point.
places are like, if I just have somebody who is blah, I can do why? That's just, you made that up one day. Like every job has a different set of things that it actually needs a person to be for that to be successful. Identify what those are, measure those, and then work to that, because anything else you do is going to cut people out with a different voice and a different perspective for reasons that aren't actually germane.
So, you know what? You made a really good point, and what this is teaching me is I should actually word this differently. It's not even that you need high empathy, you need the right amount of empathy, or you need compatible empathy. And what I mean by compatible is, to your point, if it's a coder, you may not need that much, and that's okay, and that's fine. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because yeah, that could shut out a whole other group. Um, so for the roles that do need empathy, how are you seeing in the job market that getting measured, or are you seeing it all?
Badly. Normally, so there are some things that the best way to find out that thing is to ask the person, right? Like, why do you want this job? You can't really measure that. You just got to ask them in a way that makes sense. There are other things that it's a terrible idea to ask somebody because it's awkward and cumbersome and nobody quite knows how to articulate that. So asking somebody, hey, are you really very empathetic? First of all, who in an interview is going to say, nope,
No.
me, I hate people, right? Like that's not going to happen. But second of all, except maybe a neurodivergent person who would be like, no, I am not empathetic. I struggle with that due to my neurodivergence. But in general, neurotypicals are just always going to say, of course, I'm very empathetic. I love all the people. Oh, the children, look at my tears. And then, so the right way to do it is to create a situation where they have the opportunity to demonstrate the type of empathy that you're looking for.
I love it.
So what you don't want to necessarily hire you don't really care if they love puppies. You care about, are they going to be able to understand from an emotional IQ perspective the struggles of other people on their team in a way that allows them to get the best out of those people and to work together harmoniously to achieve whatever your deliverable is for your stakeholder. Like that's what you're looking for. So create a scenario that gives them the opportunity to demonstrate that is what should happen. I think you see some companies who are trying to do that. I will say that in Europe, it's much more common. So in the UK and Europe, for all kinds of reasons, it is much more common to have what we call assessment centers, which are a whole like opportunity for people go and do all kinds of activities and behavioral things to be able to demonstrate exactly those things. And that's actually, while I was over, that was a big part of my career, was designing those for
Awesome.
employers. So, but that would be.
Oh, I love that.
Question? Okay.
It totally answers our question. And for those on here, and you were wondering why you had to do so many scenario-based questions in our certification, this is exactly why. So, Michele, you make a ton of really good points. Linda, I see you have a question.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, and it might be the scenario that you just described, but because Prowess makes sure that we do a consultation with our employers, the employers, our clients align with our missions, right? So we are working with people that should be more open and less focused on the bullshit, like the resumes and the formal interview process that we all know and hate. So my question to you is, as a person who gets so lucky to be able to help guide our talent, our candidates through these interviews with these clients that are more open-minded, what would you say would be one of your favorite questions I could help them prepare to ask? So what can I do to help prepare them for these types of newer age, hopefully shifting the world type interviews that Prowess is trying to do?
So do we a question that the interviewer can ask rather than what can you tell your clients that they should ask your folks, or your folks should ask the client? Sorry.
So what are people should be asking? So when they're in an interview, to make sure that they are getting what they need from the client, because that's so important to us, what should the interviewee be asking the interviewer? Sure.
So my advice on that is always figure out what you care about. Everybody has a different thing that they care about work. Some people, they really want work-life balance is important. Some people, they care about the perks. Some people care about people being nice and singing Kumbaya. Like, it all just depends on you as a human being. So identify for yourself, and there are people within Prowess community and other places that can help you do that. What are the elements of culture that actually are your deal breakers and are the things that are going to drive you? And then create questions around that. So if for you, it's really important that you have work-life balance, I say, a great question to ask is always, what does your organization do to ensure that your employees who are, I can't think of the word, the high achieving people who want to, your driven employees are doing what they need to do to achieve work-life balance, and put it on them. So what do you proactively do to create that for people who want to succeed? And then what that does is it takes away people often worry that asking about that makes them sound lazy, but instead it flips that, right? So it makes it like, hey, look, I'm all in. So what are you going to do to make sure I don't burn out?
Yeah. That's a great question.
And then if what you really care about is you really want to, part of what you're going back to work for is a social environment where you're going to be able to make friends and have a peer group. And I know for a lot of returners, that's huge, because, you've had nobody to talk to but tiny humans for however many years. And like, you're so excited for a grown-up conversation. And so having an environment where people actually have grown-up conversations is important. So ask about that. So say, talk to me about what the interpersonal dynamic looks like here, and what bandwidth and resources the company puts into encouraging a strong personal relationship between their team members as well as professional.
I love that. And I love just starting out with reminding them to think through, what do you care about? What matters to you? Because I think even through our process and all the things that we're trying to do, sometimes our interviews are just intimidating, and they're going to be intimidating for a long time until our culture changes. So to take that moment to recenter and be like, hey, this is about you. So what do you care about? And hopefully we can continue matching on way more than a damn resume, and that conversation flows better.
I think people get so spun up and focused on worrying about the skill set. Like, how am I going to go in and prove that I can do this job? And they forget that, hey, that's only one of the three things that the client's trying to figure out. So they want to know, can you do it? If they hire you, are you actually going to do it? Like, do you have the drive to want to do it? And then second of all, do they want you to be the person that does it? Like, those are the three things. And they really think they already know the answer to the first one. So the proving the can you do it, they already suspect you can't, or you wouldn't have the interview. So, right, that's the one that everybody focuses on and gets spun up about and freaks out about. And I know from my clients, like, they spend so much of their emotional energy on that they forget to think, okay, what do I need to know coming in out of this interview to know if I want to go to the next step? How do I know that this is going to be a safe and healthy place for me to work? Like, yes, paychecks are great, but there are other options for paychecks that you can get tomorrow if you really, really need to. So how do you know that this is going to be the right paycheck?
Yeah, because screw toxic environments.
Absolutely.
Another question, Leah.
Yes, I am curious. So I'm really intrigued by you saying that resumes and interviews should go away, especially the interview part. So what would you like to see? Because as we are trying to do it differently here and preparing more of a profile versus just a straight resume that companies are seeing, what else could we be doing for our community to kind of help break that?
So Ashley and I are actually going to have that conversation offline later as well, just so you know. So, but I would like to see that if we identify the top 10 to 20 skills, soft skills, EQ skills, what have you, that employers want, and then create either a gamified or some kind of an engagement-based way to measure those things. And then you're able to give those scores to an employer. So rather than reporting back on, and you can do things like there are ways to do this with more advanced skills, including project management, including negotiation, including team leadership, like all of that. And especially if you do it in a gamification model, then one of the advantages you get there is that people can practice and they can get better and their scores can improve. And so you can have like some of the groups that actually use this, like they do things like, here's our leaderboard. These are our top 5 people for this skill. And that becomes a sales opportunity for you as an organization to then go to clients and be like, I mean, how hot do you want them? And whatever, I got you. And so that kind of having that cachet of skills, I think it's a great way for the ladies of prowess to get to practice in a non-intimidating way. And then it also lets you be part of that revolution.
Love that. And one more question, if I may, is that in certification, the one recommendation I have for our community is to use the STAR approach when you're trying to practice for that interview. Do you have any other? That's the one that I'm used to from way back when I was doing it. But do you have any other recommendations?
Girl, nothing's changed in interviews. That's the whole problem, right? Like they're the same thing. So STAR approach, absolutely. What I say, my number one tip. All right, that's a lie. There's 2 together about interviews is first of all, make them a conversation and not an interrogation. Mm-hmm. And the way that you do that is by asking questions throughout. So give your answer and then follow that up with a question to them. Like, and that kind of piggybacks off my other one, which is no answer you give should be longer than 20 seconds. After 20 seconds, they've stopped listening. So give a short, pithy 20-second answer and then say, hey, can I tell you more about this? Would you like to know more about that? And pick the part of your answer that you wanted to go ramble about and that like you were trying not to like tell them out and ask them, or what else can I tell you about that experience? And let them drive you would be kind of my biggest. And the 20-second rule also applies to the STAR.
Real quick, what is STAR again? Remind me.
Situation, task, action, result.
Dang. Okay.
You get 1 sentence per letter. And if you do that and you do it correctly, 20 seconds and you're good.
Oh, I'll have to add that, the 1 sentence per letter. Love that.
Awesome. Well, I had a whole other section that I wanted to talk to you about, elevator pitch. So, but we're not going to get to that today. Okay. So we will definitely be having you back. We do have to wrap up, which I'm really bummed about. I could talk to you for another 3 hours. So in the second to last question, actually, what would be your one piece of advice to leave everyone with while they're trying to find a job in this current environment?
Don't give up. There's so many jobs out there. And I get really frustrated that I feel like the media is really negative about that right now. They all want to talk about how many people are unemployed and out of work. And I think that if you look at the breakdown of that, like I personally, I'm an INTJ, so I want the facts and figures, not the touchy feely. And so statistically, the majority of people who are out of work come from hospitality, food service, and travel and tourism. They don't come from IT. They don't come from loads of other places. And those places are hiring. And even the areas that have been hardest hit are starting to come back online. There are jobs out there. The biggest thing you can do to help keep your head up and keep moving is to have a really clear and cohesive plan that includes times that have break times for you. When people don't have a plan and they're just applying here, there, and everywhere, that's when you have that like sitting there hitting the refresh button on LinkedIn, waiting for a new job to pop up. That is unhealthy for you and doesn't freaking work. So instead, have a really cohesive plan, stick to it, take breaks. And like I said, just know that there are opportunities out there.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. We'll be asking you to come back as well to talk about a plan. But where can everyone find you? You just have such great stuff to offer.
I am delighted for everybody to contact me via email. I think you have my email. It's Michele@ONH, but yep. I'm on the LinkedIn. Please feel free to link in with me, ask me questions. I get people in my DM all the time. Hey, can you just check out my resume? Or, hey, I've got an interview coming up. Do you have an answer? Don't worry about asking me stuff. I don't mind. This is literally what I do for a living. So please, please, please feel free to ask away and contact me wherever it makes sense.
Awesome. And she is also in the Prowess community too. So yes, please reach out to her there as well. With that, it's been awesome. I'm going to switch over to the rest of what's Prowess is going on. Feel free to hang in and hear about it, or we know your time is valuable. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I wish I could hang out, but I have to go do a podcast recording in 10 minutes. I know. So thank you everybody so much. And please, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if anybody needs me. I know we talked about a lot of high level stuff and not a lot of like the lower level practicality, but I'm happy to give specific advice to anybody that needs it. Thanks everybody.
Awesome. 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 Thank you, Michele.